Who's your favourite Doctor is a question I get asked a lot, and I used to have a ranking video ranking all of the Doctors, but my opinions have changed quite a bit since then. So what I did was I put them into a preference revealer and finally came up with a conclusive list of my least favourite to favourite Doctors, and the answers might surprise you. I mean, hell, they surprised me. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we kick off, I'd just like to say that these are just my opinions. If your opinions are different, that's totally fine. Please feel free to leave your rankings in the comment section down below. I'd love to see how you guys rank the Doctors, because that's something great about Doctor Who, is that everyone's got their different favourite Doctors and eras, etc. So without further ado, let's get into the list. So first off, I just wanted to give an honourable mention to Jo Martin's Doctor as portrayed in Fugitive of the Judoon in Series 12, Episode 5. Now, as I've said before, we don't really know a lot about this Doctor beyond the fact that she's a Doctor that we're not aware of. She is certainly more like the classic Doctors, especially when put next to 13, which I appreciated. I also appreciated the fact that she kind of made fun of 13. In fact, a lot of the criticisms that I've had for 13's idiosyncrasies came out in her performance. However, as I've said previously, I will not be accepting of the fact that she's a pre-Hartnell Doctor if that turns out to be the case. Obviously, we don't know 100% yet, but with each day that goes by and each bit of news that gets leaked, it's looking more and more like that's the case. That's not the actress's fault as well, because I actually think that Jo Martin does a way better job than Jodie Whittaker has across 2 series, but that's just my opinion. With that said though, we've got 14 of the Doctors to rank, so let's start. Coming in at number 14, to the surprise of literally nobody, say it with me now, Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor. It's predictable at this point, I know, but there's just nothing that I can say positive about her, really, to be honest. I don't really like her performance, I don't really like the character, I'm just not a fan of any of it. Lines that she gets to deliver that aren't blatant exposition are just plain cringy. Her costume and Sonic are just horrible. Her character is just unoriginal and uninspired. I will admit that I'm glad that they're going in a darker direction with her, and I'm interested to see at least where they take her character, because frankly anything is better than the children's entertainer we've had for the past 2 series leading up to this point. I just can't stand this Doctor, and that's something I've never felt about a Doctor before. Even Peter Capaldi, I wasn't a huge fan of Peter Capaldi's Doctor when I first saw him. I thought, you know, he was just too weird and too stubborn and all that sort of stuff. But like, I learned to love him, and it wasn't really Peter Capaldi's fault that I felt that way, it was more just the way he was written. But I learned to love Capaldi. I can't see myself doing that in years to come with Whittaker. I see my opinion remaining pretty static on her. And that's a real shame, because I feel like it's almost a waste of the potential of a brand new female Doctor. I thought they were really going to shake things up with the introduction of a female Doctor, but it turns out they just kind of did more of the same, and I think that's just a real shame. And much like Series 11 itself, Jodie just feels way too safe, and Series 12 Jodie, while being an improvement, still not much better, because even when she's doing emotional scenes, it just doesn't work. It looks like a kid throwing their toys out the pram. I mean, just watch this scene and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just not convincing to me in the slightest. But anyway, I'm going to move on to the next one before this video becomes a Jodie Whittaker rant. At number 13, we have John Hurt's War Doctor. Now, this is one that I always feel a bit guilty about, because obviously we only saw John Hurt's War Doctor incredibly briefly in Day of the Doctor, and what we saw of him was really good, and obviously John Hurt's a legend and absolutely killed it in the role. The problem is that he's just not that original, and we just don't spend that much time with him, just due to the fact that they're bringing back 2 other Doctors in the episode that he features in. 2 other Doctors, may I remind you, who are like arguably 2 of the most top popular Doctors of all time, period. And therefore, when that happens, including Jon Baker as well, and when that happens, it's inevitable that some things are going to get lost in the shuffle. And I think that John Hurt's War Doctor is an example of that. I mean, I know he's done some Big Finish stuff, but I haven't really listened to any of his Big Finish stuff, so I can't really comment on any of it because, again, I haven't seen it. But, you know, I feel bad for putting him this low because of how much he gave the role, how much he gave, you know, the character, and it was just so sad to see him go. Number 12 sees a choice that I don't think I'm going to be alone in, but I do also feel bad for putting in this place. Colin Baker's 6th Doctor is my number 12, and the reason, quite simply, is that the writing was just terrible for him. He was written to be really unlikable, and it's a shame because Colin Baker does a fantastic job as the Doctor, and side note, is lovely in real life as well. I just can't bear the fact that throughout most of his run, they made him really unlikable and really abrasive, when in fact the actor wanted the complete opposite. I'm really not a fan of the direction of the character for the 6th Doctor. Not Colin, just the writing, as I said. And I know he's better in things like Big Finish, but Big Finish requires a lot of money which I don't have. So, that's why I haven't listened to a lot of Big Finish. I'm working on it, though. I want to listen to more. Coming in at 11th place is a choice that I don't think many people are going to agree with, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's how I've always felt, and I just can't shake the feeling even after watching more Pertwee. It's obviously Jon Pertwee. I just spoiled my own video. There you go. Yeah, Jon Pertwee is my 11th place, the 3rd Doctor. And the reason is that I just don't like the direction of the character for the 3rd Doctor. I don't like the action hero stuff, really. I like my Doctors to be more intellect driven rather than physicality driven, you know, like physical solutions. So in that case, like, that's why Pertwee sits lower down on my lists, just because he's a bit too physical for my liking. But again, that's not taking anything away from Jon Pertwee. This is to say as well, like, you know, none of the this is not against any of the actors, you know. Don't take this personally. This is just my own ranking of them, so don't think that I'm slandering the people themselves, because they're probably fine people. I'm not going, oh, that Jon Pertwee was a bit of an idiot, wasn't he? No, I'm definitely not saying that. I just thought I'd clarify that before I get comments saying I'm being disrespectful or whatever. Coming in at the 10th place is a Doctor who kind of had one of the toughest roles of any Doctor, I think, personally, to follow up from arguably the show's most iconic Doctor. We've got Peter Davison in number 10. Peter Davison is a fine Doctor. This is something I've learned. I quite enjoy his performances. The problem is, like John Hurt's Doctor, he's just not that original. There's not many things that he says or does that I could say, oh yeah, that's a 5th Doctor moment. Because I kind of feel like a lot of his dialogue you could just sort of swap with any Doctor and not a lot would really change that much. So yeah, the problem I have with a lot of my lower tier picks is that they're just not that original in our cases. Certainly at 13 and John Hurt's case. 6 was original, but what they did with him wasn't that great. And like Pertwee, what they did with him was fine, it's just not to my taste. And that's why this list is very personal, because it's completely different to anybody else's. But anyway, 9th place, another popular Doctor, and another one that's going to put a target on my back with some people. The 10th Doctor goes in 9th place, and the reason for that is, again, like his father-in-law, Tennant just really isn't that unique. He's not that alien, kind of similar to Davison. He's not really that quirky like, you know, Troughton or Baker. He's just got nothing that I can really say is that unique to David Tennant. I feel like anything you point out as a unique trait of David Tennant's Doctor could be found tenfold in another Doctor. So, in that case, yeah, again, a perfectly fine Doctor, serves a purpose, and he is much better when he's playing a darker Doctor, particularly in things like Watchers of Mars, in my opinion. But yeah, don't think that he deserves as much praise as he gets, personally. Not against David Tennant. David Tennant, you know, as you know, is a fantastic actor. I just don't think that the character of the 10th Doctor deserves as much credit as he gets, especially with the whole romantic subplot thing. That's something that I'm not a fan of with any Doctor. I don't think he should be romantically inclined at all, to be honest. But that's just my opinion, and again, if yours differs on that, it's perfectly fine. In 8th place then, we have the man who started it all, William Hartnell. Now, he has gone up a bit, I think, since my original ranking, and the reason for that is just purely that I've been watching more classic Who. I recently watched Dalek Invasion of Earth, as well as a couple of other stories, and I must say, Hartnell is better than I gave him credit for. He basically created the character that we have today. Without him, there wouldn't be a Doctor, and for that, I think you've got to always give him the utmost respect. He was just fantastic, and even at his, illest, he was still giving it 110%. I don't even know if illest is a word, by the way, but I'm going to go with it. Yeah, he was just fantastic, and I really think that we owe a lot to William Hartnell, and that's why I personally think that Joe Martin shouldn't be before him, but you know, that's a whole other thing. I've already covered that on numerous videos, so I'm not going to go too far in depth with that here. Coming in at number 7, another Doctor who's gone quite far up since my original ranking, I believe. The 12th Doctor is the 7th Doctor. The 12th Doctor is the 7th Doctor. No, the 12th Doctor is my 7th place. And the reason for that is just because, again, Peter Capaldi's performance is just fantastic. You can't really fault Peter Capaldi in any episode he's in. The problem, as I've alluded to earlier, is the writing. The writing really lets Capaldi down. I think Wingy Media says it best when he said in a tweet, he said he deserved better. And I wholeheartedly agree, he deserved the better scripts than he got. Series 8, I think he was pretty good. Series 9, I really didn't like the direction of the character with the whole sunglasses and the guitar. Series 10, I thought was basically sort of the best of both worlds, and I think if we'd have had one more series with that style with Bill, then I think people's estimations of 12 from people like me would be a lot higher, just because he'd have appeared to be a lot more consistent. But you know, that's just my opinion, and I completely understand why he would be number 1 on some people's list, because Peter Capaldi just absolutely nails the Doctor, and he's never dull in any of the episodes that he's in. Coming in at number 6, we have another relatively dour Doctor. Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor comes in 6th place, which I believe is about the same place as he was last time. So yeah, the reason he can't be any higher is just that he only had one series. That's really the only reason. I love his performances. Like many of the other Doctors that have been on this list, he doesn't really give a bad performance. The problem is, as I said, just the amount that we see him that's just not enough for me to say he's a better Doctor than some of the others who've had countless stories to prove how fantastic they are. I mean, he doesn't even do Big Finish, so you can't even really go back to him on that level. I mean, I know there's been people doing imitations of him, and that's great, but that's not Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. That's someone else imitating Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, and I personally don't count people who've been recast as the same Doctor towards the ranking. For example, I don't count David Bradley towards my ranking of the first Doctor, or Hartnell from the 5 Doctors either, just because they weren't the first Doctor, they were someone playing the first Doctor. It's a different thing entirely. But that's just, again, it's personal preference. Coming in at number 5, though, is definitely a Doctor who encapsulates a lot more of what I like about the character, Sylvester McCoy. Now, I think Sylvester gets criminally underlooked in terms of Doctors. I think because he was the one that got the show cancelled. Well, not got the show cancelled. He was the one who was the Doctor when the show was cancelled, kind of paints him in a negative light, and I don't really think that's fair, because in his later episodes, he's just absolutely fantastic. Particularly Remembrance of the Dalek sticks out when he's confronting Davros, and he's like, I am far more than just another Time Lord. Like, that scene is really good. Also, the scene in the cafe where he's talking to Jeffrey from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and he's, like, talking about time and just how little things change events and stuff like that. It's just fantastic. McCoy's just fantastic. Even in the TV movie, even though he's in it for, like, 2 seconds, he's still great, you know, and I actually think that his TV movie outfit was better than his actual outfit in the TV show, but that's another list for another day. Yeah, Sylvester's just great. And he's also the other Doctor that I met in real life, just in case you're keeping track. Coming in 4th place, we have Patrick Troughton's 2nd Doctor. There's not much I can say about Patrick Troughton's Doctor that hasn't already been said. He's just brilliant. He was the complete reverse of William Hartnell's Doctor, but somehow still managed to feel like the Doctor, and arguably had the hardest task of any Doctor, having to portray the same character that people had fallen in love with, and no one else had seen anyone else do it before. Like, hell, the word regeneration didn't even exist, I don't think, until the War Games. So, yeah, it was just amazing to see that he carried it, and it was effortless. His dynamic with Jamie in particular is just fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. There's no other way I can describe it. He's just awesome, and obviously he is the inspiration for a lot of other Doctors, including 4, 7, and 11, who are some of my favourite Doctors. So I have a lot to thank this man for, and I don't think that if he didn't do as well as he did in the 60s, we wouldn't have a Doctor Who now, in my opinion. In 3rd place, the most iconic Doctor, arguably, of all time, Tom Baker's 4th Doctor. Again, he's another Doctor that needs no words, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a video. He's just fantastic. From the jelly babies to the scarf, it's just all perfect. The only thing I would say about Tom's Doctor is that you can tell there are some episodes where he's not quite giving it his all, particularly in like season 18, I think. There's just some where he's just clearly not as enthused as he was in some of the others. But, you know, after you've been doing it for 7 years, I imagine that you start to feel a bit sort of sick of it. Particularly due to the fact that a lot of the original cast that started with him were long gone by this point. You know, obviously John Nathan Turner took over in season 18, and he wasn't a fan of John Nathan Turner. So I think that would have certainly impacted his enjoyment of the role. I'm not saying it's John Nathan Turner's fault, it's just that by this point, he was sick of it, and I think that shows. But aside from that, this Doctor is just fantastic. Like, there's a reason he's so iconic. He's just, there's been no other Doctor like him, and there likely never will be again. He's just a complete enigma when it comes to that sort of thing. Like, who else can replicate those eyes? Like, nobody. Nobody could do that. I'm convinced that he's the only one who could make his eyes go that big. But anyway, coming in 2nd place, my former favourite, Paul McGann's 8th Doctor. I've gushed about the 8th Doctor to no end in previous videos, so I'm going to try and keep this part brief. He's just fantastic. He incorporates the swashbuckling, the alien, everything that I love about the Doctor into one amazing package, and I think it's a sin that we never got any more of him. I would really be surprised if we don't see a spin-off series with him at some stage. It's got to happen. Make it happen, BBC. Time is literally keeping him young so it can happen. I just want to see him again. He's so fantastic, and he's so criminally underrated due to him being in a movie that wasn't well received by the vast majority of audiences, even though I still personally have a soft spot for it. Moving into 1st place then, if you've been tallying up, this will probably be no surprise to you, but I'm going to reveal it anyway. It's the 11th Doctor, played by Matt Smith. Now, the reason for this is basically just because he's the Doctor that I revisit the most. Out of all the Doctors, out of all the eras, I think Matt Smith's is the era that I revisit the most. Now, part of that could be down to the fact that it's nostalgia. That's certainly a factor that I'm not ruling out. He was the first Doctor that I watched entirely through his run. But I think more than anything, he's just really alien. And that's what I like about him. Don't get me wrong, Tom was alien as well. He was really, really alien. But behind it all, I feel like I could relate to 11 more in a way. Because you could tell that all the silly little jokes that he made, they were really cover-ups for quite a dark past that he was trying to suppress. And I think that is just a fantastic arc for a Doctor to have. I also think that his dynamics with his companions are really good. Amy and Rory in particular, obviously, being the standout. They just feel like one big family, and it's something that obviously the new series tried to replicate and failed at miserably. It just doesn't even compare to me. You compare the dynamics between Eleven, Amy and Rory to the Doctor, the 13th Doctor, I should say, Graham, Ryan and Yaz. It's night and day. There's no competition there. And obviously his dynamic with Clara isn't as strong, purely on the basis that we only had one series with them together. But you can tell that they both have a lot of fun, you know, bouncing off of each other. So yeah, and also I kind of like how he rejected the romantic advances of Amy and Clara, to be fair, and was like, no, especially to Amy, was like, you're getting married in the morning, so yeah, I'm not going to be your boyfriend and stuff like that. And obviously Capaldi was like that as well, but I just kind of liked how after Tennant's Doctor, how different Matt was by comparison, and that's what the show needed, in my opinion. They couldn't have just done another a David Tennant type Doctor, because it just wouldn't have worked. The show wouldn't have been sustainable, because people would have just called him a rip-off of David Tennant and stopped watching. But they went in a completely other direction, and it works perfectly. I'd also say that his end speech is probably the best, like, final speech of any Doctor, maybe the best speech of any Doctor, period. It's just a beautiful message about, remember who you used to be. It's just fantastic. There's nothing wrong with, like, his Doctor. Even, like, some cringy lines that he has that I complained about 13 for having, even some of those I think can be excused due to the fact that he's an old man in a young man's body, and that's his character. Whereas with Jodie, it feels like she's saying them just because it's in the script, essentially. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. What are your favourite Doctors? I'm really interested to see. As you can tell by this list, my rankings have changed somewhat. What I will do is I will leave a link in the description to my old list, so you can compare how my thoughts have changed. Some have remained pretty consistent, but some have altered slightly. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video. Let's see if we can get, let's see if we can get 50 likes. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Discord servers. The Discord servers are a lot of fun, and I've got the link to that as well as the Twitter in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you. Have you been craving some high quality merch that doesn't have She Who Shall Not Be Named on the cover? Are you struggling to get a gift for a family member or relative after they seem to have everything after Christmas? Well, fear not, as I have the perfect solution. Introducing Thary's merch! Not only is this merch high quality and affordable, but if you purchase it you'd also be helping me, which means a lot. But I didn't stop at just shirts, oh no. On the Thary's merch store you can get notepads, hoodies, mugs and more. Just visit the link in the description below and on screen now. Because hey, every penny you spend in the Thary's merch store is a penny that the BBC won't see. And I think that that's something we should all be proud of.
Oh, look down there, you got a little shop. I like a little shop.
Never mind that.